Welcome, everyone, to Todd's World, to Beers with Jesus. Carrie's with me.
Yay!
How's it going, Carrie?
Great. Beers with Jesus. I'm so excited.
We're fresh off news.
Yes.
I actually have a beer. Do you have a beer today or no?
Nope, I have coffee.
Hmm. See, I actually have a Bloody Mary that I
Oh,
made in
nice.
between. I was drinking coffee for news hour,
Hmm.
and now that we've made the transition to beers with Jesus, I've
There
got
you
Bloody
go.
Mary. I'm doing Bloody Marys with Jesus,
I love it. I would be
which
joining you, but I have to drive right after this, so.
coincidentally, we're going to talk
Mhm.
about Mary today. Did
Ooh,
that
okay.
make your Catholic heart go pitter patter? Where like
Always.
you're heading for a lawn ornament quick? Do a couple
Mary,
gesticulations.
Mary's the Queen Mother. I'm ready to go.
Different Mary, but still.
Mm.
All right.
All the Marys are interesting in the Bible, that's for sure.
Are you reading today? You want to read?
I
You
can
got
read
your
today.
thing, or do you want?
I could do it.
Why don't you do it? Because we're gonna do some other passages too, and so I can take some of those, and
Okay.
then we are
Now,
in Mark 14. What we do on this show, guys, is we just kind of walk through the story of Jesus as found in the Gospel of Mark, at least for this current season. And so we are at Mark 14, which leaves us only 3 chapters left of Mark.
wow.
We're going to be perfectly set to do the crucifixion over Christmas.
Oh my gosh, we apologize.
Maybe, and I thought about because in
Mhm.
Mark we didn't there isn't much about it. It starts kind of right with Jesus getting baptized by John, right?
Mhm.
There isn't really much about the birth of Christ, and I thought we could switch over for December and we could
Oh,
do Luke. We could do the
let's
first
do
part of Luke
that.
where we talk about, the
The
birth of
trip to
Jesus and Christmas and
Bethlehem,
yeah,
and
the whole thing.
that's a great
And
idea.
then after first of the year we can do the crucifixion.
Okay, that
So
sounds good.
we
How
could do
far do
that.
you how far are we covering today
Just
in
one
the
section.
okay, the anointing his head section?
Yeah.
Okay,
So read it for our millions of people listening. They're waiting. They can't wait.
I know. Are you all ready?
They've got their little Mary
Mark
keychain ornament.
chapter chapter 14, anointing his head. In only 2 days, the 8-day festival of the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread would begin. The high priest and religion scholars were looking for a way they could seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. They agreed that it should not be done during Passover week. We don't want the crowds up in arms, they said. Jesus was at Bethany, a guest of Simon the leper. While he was eating dinner, a woman came up carrying a bottle of very expensive perfume. Opening the bottle, she poured it on his head. Some of the guests became furious among themselves. That's says that's criminal. Oh, that's criminal. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
That's
criminal.
criminal. A
There you go.
sheer waste. This perfume could have been sold for well over a year's wages and handed out to the poor. They swelled up in anger, nearly bursting with indignation over her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why are you giving her a hard time? She has just done something wonderfully significant for me. You will have the poor with you every day for the rest of your lives. Whenever you feel like it, you can do something for them. Not so with me. She did what she could when she could. She pre-anointed my body for burial. And you can be sure that whenever in the whole world the message is preached, what she just did is going to be talked about admiringly. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the cabal of high priests, determined to betray him. They couldn't believe their ears and promised to pay him well. He started looking for just the right moment to hand him over.
Hmm. So Judas has taken his place.
Yeah.
Um, Mark doesn't give us much about this woman.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? We don't have. It's just in Mark, it's like this woman out of the blue. He just happens to be a guest of Simon the leper. Um, before we get into it
Hmm.
too much,
Okay.
there's a parallel passage to this in John, which is interesting
Okay.
because
Oh.
John's not part of the synoptic gospels. Generally there is a parallel passage in Matthew too, Matthew
Okay.
26. pretty much when I say parallel, it's almost the same.
Hmm.
John, though, gives us a little different take.
Okay.
So I'm going to read John 12 quick.
Okay. The
And
Gospel of John.
the Gospel of John 12,
Okay.
verse 1.
Don't mock me. I was just clarifying. Okay.
Sorry, it's the Bloody Mary. Um, 6 days before Passover, Jesus entered Bethany, where Lazarus, so recently raised from the dead, was living. Lazarus and his sisters invited Jesus to dinner at their home. Martha served. Lazarus was one of those sitting at the table with them. Mary came in with a jar of very expensive aromatic oils, anointed and massaged Jesus' feet, and then wiped them with her hair. The fragrance of the oils filled the house. Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, even then getting ready to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this oil sold?" Excuse me. Why wasn't this oil sold and the money given to the poor? It would have easily brought 300 silver pieces. He said this not because he cared 2 cents about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of their common funds, but he also embezzled them. Jesus said, "Let her alone. She's anticipating and honoring the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you. You don't always have me."
Mm.
Word got out among the Jews that he was back in town. The people came to take a look, not only at Jesus, but also at Lazarus, who had been raised from the dead. So the high priest plotted to kill Lazarus because so many of the Jews were going over and believing in Jesus on account of him.
Wow.
So Mary, Martha, and Lazarus,
Hmm.
brothers, sister, some of Jesus' best friends throughout his ministry. We see frequent times where he
Hmm.
stops by their house. One of the first times we see that is in Luke 10. And in Luke 10, Mary and Martha. Remember the story of Mary and Martha?
Hmm.
As they continued their travel, Jesus entered a village. A woman by the name of Martha welcomed him and made him feel quite at home. She had a sister Mary who sat before the master, hanging on every word he said.
Hmm.
But Martha was pulled away by all she had to do in the kitchen. Later, she stepped in, interrupting them. "Master, don't you care that my sister has abandoned the kitchen to me? Tell her to lend me a hand." The master said, "Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much and getting yourself worked up over nothing. One thing only is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course and won't be taken from her." So Mary
Hmm.
tends to respond to Jesus differently than other people
Yes.
that she's
Yes.
around.
And Jesus is like, this lady's got it. Like she gets it.
The other thing in John, and it was
Hmm.
referenced in John 12, that we don't get in Mark. This story doesn't make it into Mark, which is the raising of Lazarus from the dead.
Oh, okay. Oh,
And
yeah.
that's in John 11, which I expect that after we're done with Mark, maybe we'll go through John because the stories are real different, are very
You're
different. I
right.
mean, not
That's
that
cool.
there's just different. It everything about it reads different. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? The long story made short of Jesus was extremely close
Hmm.
to Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Stayed at their house multiple times. They'd have them over for dinner. Mary
Hmm.
obviously was one of his disciples, whether or
Hmm.
not she was following him around all the time or not. And for Lazarus, it says a man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. This was the same Mary who massaged the Lord's feet with aromatic oils and then wiped them with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Master, the one you love so very much is sick." So Jesus is out with his disciples. This is before she anoints his feet with oil,
Hmm.
because that's in this final Passion Week, right? That's where we're at
Right.
right now. So we're getting this is before that Lazarus
Hmm.
is sick. Jesus is off with his disciples, and when Jesus got the message, he said, "This sickness is not fatal. It will become an occasion to show God's glory by glorifying God's Son." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, but oddly, when he heard Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. After the 2 days, he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." They said, "Rabbi, you can't do that. The Jews are out to kill you, and you're going back?" Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in daylight doesn't stumble because there's plenty of light from the sun. Walking at night, he might very well stumble because he can't see where he's going." He said these things and then announced, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going to wake him up."
Mm.
Uh, so the disciple said, "Master, if he's gone to sleep, he'll get a good rest and wake up feeling fine." Jesus was talking about death, while his disciples thought he was talking about taking a nap. Then Jesus became explicit. "Lazarus died, and I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there. You're about to be given new grounds for believing. Let's go to him." When Jesus finally got there, he found Lazarus already dead for 4 days.
Wow.
Bethany was near Jerusalem, only a couple of miles away, and many of the Jews were visiting Martha and Mary, sympathizing with them over their brother. Martha heard Jesus was coming and went out to meet him. Mary remained in the house. Martha said, "Master, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask for, God will give you." And Jesus said, "Your brother will be raised up." Martha replied, "I know that he'll be raised up in the resurrection at the end of time." Jesus said, "You don't have to wait for the end. I am right now, resurrection and life. The one who
Wow.
believes in me, even though he or she dies, will live. And everyone who lives believing in me does not ultimately die at all. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Master. All along I have believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world." After saying this, she went to her sister Mary and whispered in her ear, "The teacher is here, and he's asking for you." The moment she heard that, Mary, we're talking about, Mary
Hmm.
jumped up and ran out to him. Jesus had not yet entered the town, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When her sympathizing Jewish friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep there. Mary came to where Jesus was waiting, and fell at his feet, saying, "Master, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her sobbing, and the Jews with her sobbing, a deep anger welled up within him. He said, "Where did you put him?" "Master, come and see," they said. Now Jesus wept. The Jews said, "Look how deeply he loved him." Others among them said, "Well, if he loved him so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man." Then
Wow.
Jesus, the anger again welling up within him, arrived at the tomb. It was a simple cave in the hillside with a slab of stone laid against it. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." The sister of the dead man, Martha, said, "Master, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead 4 days."
Ugh.
Jesus looked her in the eye. "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" Then to the others, "Go ahead, take away the stone." They removed the stone. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and prayed, "Father, I am grateful that you have listened to me. I know you always do listen. But on account of this crowd standing here, I've spoken so that they might believe that you have sent me." Then he shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him loose." So that's the story we don't get
Hmm.
in Mark. But it also gives us a little bit of those stories all kind of coming together, kind of give us a spot to where we're entering this story. Do you know what I mean?
Right. To just let you know how close he is to this family.
Yeah, how much they mean to this isn't some chick
And
just out of the blue.
right. And what he must mean to them.
Yeah,
Right. Um, I mean, they knew enough that was it Martha who said, I know that he's going to be resurrected later.
yeah,
So I mean, she has faith in everything that he has taught them.
yeah.
So
But they both said the same thing, and their reaction isn't any different than ours, which is if you'd have been here, if you'd have just answered this
yeah,
prayer, none
right.
of this would have happened.
And I mean, everything they know tells them that it's too late now. And it makes sense. They're not being disrespectful. It's like, It's completely understandable for them to think that it's too late now for
And
their
now
brother.
Jesus is back and he's eating with them.
Right.
And while he's eating with them, and
Mm-hmm.
these people are coming, the Jews are coming to see Lazarus because he was raised from. I mean, this story's gotten around to the point the Pharisees want to kill Lazarus too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember ever hearing that Lazarus had a target on his back.
Yeah,
That's
because
awful
so many
because
Jews were believing in Jesus because he raised Lazarus from the dead.
they feel like if they can take him out, that will discredit
Hmm.
Jesus somehow. Wow. That's
He's
terrible.
a threat to the system and all these things that he's
Yeah.
doing, even raising a person from the dead. Now, that person who's been raised from the dead is a
Hmm.
threat to this whole system that they've built up. Rightly so. They're judging it rightly. It is a threat. Jesus is a threat to the system, and he's going to bring the whole thing down.
Hmm.
So that's where we enter this story. He's sitting down and he's eating with them. And even though Jesus told his disciples over and over again what was going to happen, it seems like they didn't get it, right?
Right.
Even though he said that the Son of Man's
They're,
going to be betrayed, he's going to be killed, he's going
hmm
to be arrested, all these things, largely they didn't get it. I don't think that's true of Mary. I think Mary heard it and Mary knew what was coming.
hmm
You know what I mean?
This Mary is really in tune with him. Um, so there's a great book, and I don't know if we wouldn't have covered this story of Mary and Martha
No,
before because it's not in
it's not in
Mark, right?
Mark. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if we talked about them at some other point, but because we cover a lot of ground sometimes. But there's a great book called Having a Mary Heart in a Martha World.
Oh, that sounds great.
I looked it up. It's called Joanne. Are you teasing me?
Just kidding.
Okay. It's by Joanna Weaver. I looked it up. So it's a great book. We live in a Martha world. Martha's in the kitchen, like, hey, we got to serve these people. We've got job to do. Let's go. Mary, what are you doing? Hanging out
Right.
with the visitors in the living room. Like, get in here and
Yeah.
help me. Whereas Mary is really in tune with the presence of Jesus. She's captivated by him. Now, Martha loves him,
Yeah.
but
And
she's
she
very
believes him.
yes, 100%. But she's very distracted by the tasks, her to-do list,
Right.
her job, her very earthly role. But Mary is like, this is the most important thing right now. And
Yeah.
she's so in tune with him. I love this story. I didn't know we were going to be reading that today because it's been a crazy week. So I mean,
I know, and I thought about telling you, and I thought, nah, we'll just let her. She does a good job on being the responding like all the listeners do. Like you
okay.
embody all the
You
listeners.
have
Do you know
a
what I mean?
lot of faith in me. Thank you.
And I knew
But
you were busy this week.
yeah, but she is I love that about her. I love that she and I also don't remember because when I've read this before, I don't read it like we do. We read it. We read it slowly and we talk about all
Yeah.
of the moving parts in the story and all of the people, everything that's happened before this and I don't remember I actually like this story and I don't remember Jesus saying that she was anointing him for his burial. This
Yeah.
is the first time that that's really hit me.
And you know, she's the only one who did. Because what happened if and we'll see this, I think we'll see this in Mark.
Hmm.
But Jesus is killed and he's killed on a Friday, traditionally,
Hmm.
right? Good Friday.
Hmm.
Died at approximately 3 in the afternoon
Hmm.
is the thought. And they needed to get him someplace buried or in a tomb before sundown on Friday because sundown on Friday is when the Sabbath starts.
Oh, okay. And they
So
don't do
so
that
they no, they
kind of
don't do it on
work.
the
Okay.
Sabbath. So when they were coming back Sunday morning
Hmm.
to the tomb,
Hmm.
the women who were coming back were coming to do all these things to anoint him for burial and all the things that they did to the dead in that day, the anointings and everything else.
Hmm.
That never happened because Jesus was risen. The
Right.
angel was sitting on the stone,
It's
and
like, I'm good.
spoiler alert, Jesus was gone.
Hmm.
So the only person when Jesus says that this is going to be remembered all through time, wherever the gospel is preached, the only person who both recognized, I think, that Jesus was what Jesus was talking about, and that he was that he was telling him what was plainly going to happen. He was about to
Mm-hmm.
die. He was about to be arrested and be killed. The only person who got that was seemed to be Mary, or
Mm-hmm.
at least that we see who does something so obvious about it. And she's the only one who actually did anoint him
Mm-hmm.
for the burial. His what turned out to be somewhat of a short stay
It's
in the tomb.
it's beautiful that she does because she's someone who is so closely connected to, this death and resurrection with her brother by Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful that she plays a part in that anointing of Jesus because
And
she
this
I'm
was
sure
like
she gets what's
her
happening
most
too.
valued possession, this
Right.
this
This
perfume. And what
like
they
a
did,
perfumed oil is what I've
it
read
was
in other
probably like a
sources.
dowry because it was worth they estimate about a year's wages.
Wow.
So say in our day and age it's worth, I don't know, 50 grand, who knows.
Sure. Hmm.
But this was what would probably be her dowry on her marriage, that they would pay somebody to take their daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
And the way they did this is it was all encased, and then when they break it and she just pours it all this is meant to be little bits of drips and drabs, and she
Right.
just drenches Jesus in this oil.
Hmm.
And in so doing, she really pisses off the people that are watching. Although once we narrow it down, we've got just the people watching in Mark. In Matthew, it says the disciples, and once we get to John, it's Judas who's pissed off. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and it's funny how they like this could have been sold and the money could have been given to the poor. And
Yeah.
it's like, I doubt that's what they're really thinking. You know, no
Well, it
one.
also makes you think, and I thought about that as I was looking at this passage this week. I thought there's two. I feel like there's two primary kind of characters in
Okay.
this. I mean, there's Jesus, obviously. Jesus is always
Hmm.
the primary character, but playing off of him,
Hmm.
there's two characters, and one is Mary and her response to Jesus, and one is Judas in his
Hmm.
response to Jesus. And I think
Yeah.
what's so interesting about John's gospel is when he says that um he said this not because he cared about the money for the poor, not because he cared 2 cents about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of their common funds, but he also embezzled them. So, what made me think about that is we don't often think, or we don't spend a lot of time thinking about Judas. He's not, I don't think, a comfortable character in this particular story.
No, we just
Like
only know like the worst thing that he did. That's pretty much
what
all we
causes
know.
Judas to betray Jesus? You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Okay.
Because we have to assume that he started out as dedicated to Jesus as the rest of them were,
Right. He should have. He should
as
have
much
been.
of a believer as the rest of them were.
Hmm.
But I think that one thing to take from this is that betrayals don't generally just start on like the big scale.
Like
Like
they don't. Yeah, they don't happen
he's
overnight.
already at some point, and who knows if Jesus wasn't looking at Judas a little bit when he said, "You can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and money, or serving one, you'll hate the other." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So you can't serve God and money. And it seems to be at some point, money took a higher priority in Judas' life than Jesus did. In
Hmm.
fact, he may have been disappointed with Jesus. I mean, they obviously thought he was going to set up a physical kingdom. As that
Right.
became more and more clear that he was not going to, it's possible that Judas felt betrayed by Jesus.
Sure. And that the concept of a kingdom, stirs up visions of wealth and luxury,
Yeah.
especially if you're among the leadership of that kingdom. So if they thought that was all physical, I'm sure Judas was having some, grandiose
And he's
visions of his
already
future.
pilfering from the common purse
Hmm.
that the disciples kind of kept.
Gosh,
And then you
imagine,
wonder
imagine being like a thief, like you're following Jesus and being a
from
thief.
Jesus.
Imagine. It's pretty rough,
And
pretty
they
brazen.
I know, and not
Like,
only
dude, you're
that,
stealing from the Son of God.
it's kind of wild, right? He
Hmm.
does that. You wonder if when Jesus met that rich young ruler and told him to go sell everything he had and give it to the poor and then come back, you wonder if Judas was pissed because here's this guy with all this money. He wants to come and follow us. He's going to put it in the common purse.
Right.
Like, just
I'm gonna get a
what is
little piece
going
of this,
on?
guys. Yeah, that's interesting.
It seems like Jesus is going out of his way to make sure we don't get any more money,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
He's healing all these people. I mean, we can at least collect some extra donations from it.
Sure.
But Jesus, I don't think, was all that interested in that.
No.
And so it is interesting to think of how at some point it says that this is when the devil entered, or this is when Satan entered Judas.
Oh,
And
wait, where does it say that?
it's
I missed
related to
that.
this story. I think it's a little later
Okay.
when it's the talking about what we'll talk about next week.
Okay.
Or it could be in Matthew that it does that. I can't remember. Blah 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 blah. It might be in
Wow.
Matthew. I can't
Satan
remember.
entered Judas.
Yeah. Or it could
Well,
be in Luke. There's a lot of gospels.
'cause he opened, well, I was gonna say he opened the door for sure.
Yeah. I don't know where it says it, but I know that it's in
Hmm.
here someplace.
Okay.
And it's like just it's kind of wild that
Hmm.
to think about the compromises that got Judas to that point because they were a lot
Hmm.
smaller. They obviously it starts a lot
Oh yeah, yeah.
smaller.
That's what you started to say.
But I think that this I think that's the same idea on the other side with Mary. Meaning
Okay.
it doesn't Mary doesn't start with this unbelievable huge sacrifice to Jesus, sacrificing this thing that's most precious to her and anointing him with it and doing all this.
Hmm.
That's not her. It doesn't start there. It starts earlier on.
Hmm.
It starts with smaller sacrifices to
Right. I think she's
Jesus.
just
Do you
at
know what
his
I
feet
mean?
while he's teaching and she's listening. Is that what you mean? Like just
Yeah.
she was following him in smaller ways.
I think sometimes we see people, and whether it's a massive like some massive sin, some big,
Hmm.
Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker kind of thing, whatever. But
Stealing
something
millions.
or whatever. I mean, it's just
Sure.
some big, huge thing. And we see that and we think, God, how could they ever do that?
Hmm.
Well, if you take them 2 or 3 years back in the process, or even just a few months, you can see how all these little decisions led to that. And then on this flip side, we see somebody who makes these massive sacrifices for Jesus, just seems to do to have almost a direct line to the spirit of Jesus in a way that isn't typical.
Hmm.
And then we think, how did they get there? Well, they didn't get there. They got there through all the small stuff, the small
Got it.
decisions, the seeds that they planted along the way.
Right.
One is seeds of betrayal, the other is seeds of worship. But they kind of come to fruition in the same way and over the same amount of time. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yes.
Having, oh, I guess you could say having a Mary heart in a Martha world. I'm just kidding.
Right. Well, I know you're
That
teasing.
is a
I think
good
it's such
book.
a
I
I
have
think it's a
heard that
great book.
name before,
It's a great book. It's a
probably
great
from
book.
you,
It may be, I feel like we talked about it a long time
because
ago.
it sounds like it'd be written by a chick.
Oh yeah, it's
And
definitely
I don't read
it's
books
written
written by
for
chicks.
women. Stop. It's written for women because it's very much, how to it's how to ground yourself spiritually in our busy,
Yeah,
womanly roles. It's hard.
makes sense.
But you're reminding me of the screw tape letters. I can't believe I'm bringing up C.S. Lewis
Look at you
before
go.
Todd today, but you know, this this junior kind of demon in training is talking about getting the man. I can't remember his name. I think the man, we have his name, don't we?
No,
We
Wormwood, we
don't.
have his name.
Oh, okay,
Wormwood
gotcha.
is the tempter. We
Okay.
don't know the guy's name. I don't
Wormwood.
think anyway. Not that I recall.
Yeah. But the man, the human, he talks about tempting him in it and chipping away at his strength in really small ways.
Yeah.
Really small ways. That's how he starts. It's so small and it seems harmless. I'm trying to remember the
You
example.
know
I
what?
feel
I think
like,
I can find it.
oh, cool. I was gonna say, I feel like it was something about
I think I can
maybe
find it.
about being something about being hungry or
I
I
just
don't know.
have
I
to
can't remember something about lunch or something about being hungry is what is sticking
I
in my
don't know
head,
if I'm
but
going to find the exact one that you want, but
it's fine.
I
But
do have I think one if I can
but he
find
just
it.
yeah,
It's
but he
talking
just
about the
talks about the
gradual
tiny
road to hell.
yes.
I think that's what you're talking about, and I
Mm-hmm.
just got to see if I can find it real quick because it is really good. It's exactly what you're. talking about.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you're talking about with Judas. Judas wasn't this stand-up guy who suddenly one day got tempted by a bunch of money or possessed by the devil to make an evil decision that, changed, well, I mean, it fulfilled a prophecy, but still changed history. He he was gradually making dishonest moves and living in small ways, not the right way, not the best way.
Right.
And eventually he got to this point where
It's a
he's like,
slow
hey,
turning
yeah.
in people, and it can either and it's a slow turning in both directions, even though they're
Mm-hmm.
opposite directions.
Mm-hmm.
It works similarly.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Totally. It makes complete sense. But
That for Mary it was making the small choices right.
mm-hmm.
Jesus is there, and she could be busy getting dinner around, doing all the things that she would be expected to do, that she would know would at least not piss Martha off
Mm-hmm.
that day.
Right, right.
But it's
And
more
again, well,
important to her
mm-hmm.
to sit at Jesus' feet. And that is a weird one. It's tough for because there's a lot of Marthas out there that are
Oh
like,
yeah.
this is not fair. Anything about this? Yeah,
I
if
know.
we all just sat at your feet, it'd be great. And then there'd be nothing to eat. We all be
There'd be
hungry.
no dinner,
Yeah,
the
I think that that's a pretty reasonable thing to say. And
right. The donkey would be in the kitchen eating all of our vegetables and it's we get it. But while he's looking for that, I think to, hey,
hey, let's take a break quick and
okay.
we'll.
Hey, Lauren.
Okay, I found that thing you were looking for, that C.S. Lewis quote.
Cool.
It was the Christians describe the enemy as one without whom nothing is strong, and nothing is very strong, strong enough to steal away a man's best years, not in sweet sins, but in a dreary flickering of the mind over it knows not what and knows not why, in the gratification of curiosities so feeble that the man is only half aware of them, in drumming of fingers, in kicking of heels, in whistling tunes that he does not like, or in the long, dim labyrinth of reveries that have not even lust or ambition to give them relish, but which once chance association has started them, the creature is too weak and fuddled to shake off. You will say that these are very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness.
Mhm.
But do remember the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts.
Yeah.
And I think it works the same way in the reverse too.
Mm-hmm.
The road to Jesus and the road away from Jesus is a series of small turnings. It's a series of daily choices. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say when you were looking. I was going to say that you've challenged people who don't read the Bible to give it 30 days.
Yeah.
Just 30 days, read something like Isaiah or Gospel of Mark or whatever, and just kind of just give it a chance to just kind of open that door. And it's such a small step. And you're beyond that, but you practice daily. You have a routine and you have
Yeah. Well,
your
I don't know if I'm
time.
beyond it. I do it.
Right,
I've
you do it, but but I mean
I've got the
you
habit set up anyway.
right, but you're reading the Bible daily, you have, your prayer time and reflection time, and I think it's a great habit. And that probably seems like a small thing to you, but you've been doing it now so long, that's why it seems small. To someone who doesn't do that, it's a big commitment, but I do think you just start small. Start with the 30-day
Yeah.
challenge that you give them and see where it takes you. It's the same thing in reverse. It's taking a step every day to try to turn towards God and be at least open to what he has to say.
Yeah. Plant a few seeds
Hmm.
that you at least know are good seeds
Hmm.
and see what happens. I mean, I honestly, if after 30 days people feel the exact same way and they think it was a bunch of BS, well, okay. At least I guess
Okay,
you gave it a shot, you
maybe.
know? But that's that I mean, that's kind of how I think about it. I also think
Right,
what's interesting is how much like how what Mary's been through with Jesus when you consider the reason I went through the whole Lazarus part is because they didn't know. Like we know as Jesus is on his way to
right,
Lazarus, and we've
right.
known since we were little kids because we saw it on the flannel graphs in Sunday school that
Hmm.
that he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But Mary and Martha didn't know he was going to raise Jesus from the dead, or not
Right.
Jesus,
Oh,
Lazarus.
Lazarus. Right, right.
God raised Jesus from the dead, yes, but they didn't know Jesus was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. They just felt ignored by Jesus.
Yeah, they felt like, why are you here now? It's like you should have been here 3 days ago,
They felt the
4 days
same
ago.
thing that we feel when we're like, but God, you're too late now.
Right.
I don't like it's great that you're here. It's great that you showed up. But if you'd have just showed up a little sooner, we wouldn't
Right.
be dealing with we wouldn't have my brother in the tomb 4 days dead
Right.
because you just didn't feel like coming.
Yeah.
When we first sent you, you just hung out for a while. And it's a difficult that's I think the point that point where you have Jesus standing on I picture it being, kind of a hillside or kind of walking along a hill and in the desert. And Mary meets him on this like narrow, or Martha meets him first.
Hmm.
And she says, if you would have been here. And then Mary meets him and she's like, if you, and they both are saying the same thing. And we've got these two different kind of approaches to life with Mary and Martha, both of whom believe Jesus, both
Hmm.
of whom love Jesus. He's like one of their best friends. And they know that if he'd have been there, this
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened.
They know he's a healer. I'm sure they're just feeling like this
And
is
they know
terrible,
he
terrible
loved
timing.
Lazarus. Like none of
Hmm.
this makes any sense
Hmm.
at this point where they're meeting him. And that's what I think that's the point that so many of us come to, where we meet Jesus and something's
Hmm.
happened, something's died, maybe the business has gone down, maybe whatever, somebody's gotten sick, whatever it is,
Hmm.
maybe the cancer grew instead of shrank.
Right.
Whatever it is, you come to this point where you're like, but you could have changed this, you know?
Hmm.
And Jesus kind of stands there and says, but even now, do you believe me even now? And I think that's that question to all of us. Like, do we believe him even now, even in the face of disappointment
Hmm.
and of knowing that he waited too long?
Right. Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about that in your life? Like, for me, it's like a process. I have the moment where it's like, you should have been here. Why weren't you here days
Yeah.
ago or weeks ago or whatever the case may be? And then I'm reminded, I'm not in control of this.
It's hard because
You kind of just go through the process and you're like, God's going to take
because
care of this. However,
Mary and
it's not how I
Martha's
think, but he'll take care of it.
Mary and Martha's bitch with Jesus is the same that mine is so frequently, which is
Right.
mostly about timing. It's like
It
not about what I
is.
believe about Jesus.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not about what I know that Jesus can do. It's not about what I know that the Bible says he can do or any of those
Hmm.
things. But I'm really not on the same page with the timing. I don't understand.
I know,
You know
not
what I
at
mean?
all. We all need a meeting.
Yeah.
Jesus, we're calling a meeting.
And so yeah, I faced that multiple times. And multiple times with people who were close to me who passed away. And they,
Mhm.
Jesus didn't raise them from the dead afterwards, you know?
Right.
And so you stand there in that disappointment and you say, can you find the faith to believe him anyway? And now
Right.
for Mary, this person that she loves so much, who brought her brother back, her brother's sitting at the table, and that's
Hmm.
crazy, right?
Hmm.
Because this dude was dead for 4 days, all
Right.
wrapped up and stinking. And he's sitting at the table and he's eating, and it's like his favorite meal, and everybody's like, this is crazy, right? All
Right.
these people are coming from all over to see
And
her
four
brother.
days, 4 days of grief is a lot too. Um, 4 days after you've lost someone you love, it's like
You're probably
you're
out of shock.
yes, you're out of shock. It is really sinking in
There's
that
some anger.
everything, oh yeah, everything, your life moving forward is now going to be without this person.
Yeah.
And 4 days is a long time to process. You're pretty deep and not past the grief. You're deep in it. You're drowning in the grief on day 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is
And for
huge.
Mary, what it's brought her to is this point of, I know that he's going
Mhm.
away and that he's going to be killed because he's telling us that. Nobody else is getting it, but
Yeah.
she knows Jesus. She's on his wavelength enough. She's sat at his feet enough to know what he's talking about. And she knows him and she knows this is
Hmm.
going to happen. And so she doesn't have very much time. But in the time she has, she does what she can with what she has and just pours it all out over him. I mean, to the point that it's just, you could imagine it's reeking out the entire house.
I know.
Like people need respirators for this. She's just caused a scene, is what
Hmm.
she's done. And all the people there are not are she's made everybody uncomfortable. They're all uncomfortable with the scene that she's caused.
They
And they're
really
all
are.
annoyed that she's caused the scene. Because why do you got to cause this kind of a scene, Mary, all the time?
You know
Everybody
what's
knows that
funny?
you love Jesus. You sit at his feet, all that. And then this. We're just trying to eat.
You know what's funny is that Jesus probably loves that she caused a scene because you know how he confronts
Well, he
everything.
does,
He's
yeah.
offensive and he disrupts things, and I think he probably just thinks this is perfect.
I agree. That's what he seems like.
Right.
Well, it's clearly the reaction of the people, and we narrow it down, but it's fair to
Hmm.
say it probably wasn't just Judas.
Right, right.
John describes it just as Judas, but John clearly has not exactly buried the hatchet with Judas at the point that he
Hmm.
wrote this gospel.
Right.
So, and
Yeah, I mean, in
probably
Mark, it just says some of the guests.
because not only did you can imagine if you were a disciple,
Hmm.
Judas didn't just betray Jesus. Judas betrayed all of you. Like that
Oh, yeah.
betrayal would stick hard.
He betrayed, yeah, the movement.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That betrayal would stick. And I think clear from John's gospel it did.
Hmm.
But the all these people are having this reaction, and their reaction, they try to take this practical standpoint of imagine all that could be done for the poor.
I know. I'm sorry.
Right?
That makes me laugh. It really makes me laugh. Like,
And
that's not what they're thinking of doing with it.
it's like everything comes down to like math or like science. We're so materialistic.
Hmm.
And our culture is maybe one of the worst, but just in general, humanity is like materialistic. It's
Hmm.
like counting things. It's like, well, yeah, but you just poured out $50,000 on Jesus. Imagine how many turkey dinners you could have bought for the homeless.
I know.
And that doesn't mean that buying turkey dinners for the homeless is bad. That's not, Jesus says you're always going to have them with you. You can help them anytime you want. In fact, you
Hmm.
should. Multiple times throughout all the gospels, he makes it sound like our eternal destinies almost hang on how we treat the less fortunate among
Hmm.
us. Because they're like, remember when the people come to him and they say, we did all these, we did this, and he says, you didn't help the prisoner out. You didn't help the poor out. You didn't. And they said, when did, or him, he says, you didn't help me. You saw me in need and you didn't help me. You saw me in prison and you didn't rescue me. And they say, when did we see you like that? And he said, anytime it was the least of one of these, it was me. Because
Hmm.
on the other hand, people are welcomed into heaven. And he's like, because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. And they're like, we never did. What are you talking about? When did we see you and give you? And he's like, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me.
Hmm.
So that's all through. Jesus has a very well prescribed caring for the poor and the unfortunate. That's who he came for. He came for the lost.
Hmm.
And then but then they try to turn it on him. They try to take it and become like everything is about what's the best use, the best economical use of the dollar that we could possibly have. And it's clear that God doesn't think that way at all. It like
Right.
doesn't even enter into his thinking. We've talked about it before how money's just it doesn't seem to be much a part of his reckoning. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Right. Yeah. He doesn't care. He's really more about obviously the spirit behind it all. The spirit underneath, the
Yeah.
spirit of who are you helping and why? Well, and even um was it was it in this? Sorry, never mind. I had a thought, but I'm not sure it was in this. Um, but I mean, he wants everything we do to glorify God. So I wonder if he chuckled when the guys, when somebody said, "This could have been sold and money could have been given to the poor." I wonder if Jesus like rolling his eye, like, yeah, whatever. Like that's not
Well,
what we're
if
saying.
it was if Judas was one of the primary, you know, people yelling
Mm-hmm.
about it and upset
Mm-hmm.
about it, he was probably, you see this, Jesus knows. He knows what he's
Mm-hmm.
dealing with in Judas. He knows what Judas has become. And he
Right.
probably
I'm
still
sure
has
he's
some
seen it.
grief over what Judas was once to him because he was, I think we can assume, a friend, a close friend.
Sure.
And it's developed,
He's watched that slow turning.
yeah.
He's watched it happen, I'm sure.
And it was prophesied. I mean, to some extent, he knew that this was the story that was
Mm-hmm.
that he was going to walk, but it still had to kind of hurt. And then to have someone who loves you so much that she's reckless in her in her love, just does something that just seems completely reckless to everybody, and yet to
Mm-hmm.
Jesus and to God, it's like, yeah, but that's what I want. I want that recklessness. I want you to love me and to know me without abandon.
Mm-hmm.
I've already promised to take care of you, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Just learn to know me, learn to love me, and just
Mm-hmm.
pour it out recklessly and whatever. Don't worry about what the rest of them say, because any place the message is preached, what she did is, and it has. I mean, it's become an integral part of the gospel message.
I like the example of it too, the pouring, because this container, it's like once she broke it and is pouring it, like there's no way to stop it, slow it, catch it. Like
Right.
you say, it's, with abandon, just it's all coming out. And there's just something I really like about that parallel of like that kind of double meaning of the pouring,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
it's
she's
all she
given
it's all
everything
she
that she
has.
has
Hmm.
without any abandon at all, just dumping it out all over him,
Hmm.
washing his feet with her hair, because she realizes he's not going to be there long,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
And she just loves him that much. I think that's it's such a juxtaposition
Hmm.
to Judas, obviously.
Right. I know it's really like the two extremes at this point, right
Yeah, they
before the
are extremes.
passion.
They represent the paths, I guess, that each of us choose.
Hmm.
They are extremes, they're extreme
Right.
versions of those paths. But I think we could say that they all come to the same thing.
Right. We've got devotion and rejection, basically.
Yeah, you either worship him or you hate him and call him a devil,
Wow.
and
Yikes.
and join in league with the Pharisees
Mm,
and with the religious leaders. So it's yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's a good story.
it is. It
I
is
uh
good.
I was kind of sitting with it for a lot of the week, just kind of like, I don't want to get too far into the characterization of Judas, but I do at the same time feel like there's stuff to learn there, and we never think of it much because he's not a very comfortable character for us to spend much time on.
Right. And like we just remember him for the one horrible thing that he did,
Right.
and that's tough.
And it was pretty horrible.
And right.
It
I
was pretty
know
bad.
it's really bad. And I think too, there probably is a lot more to him. Is he written about more? Is he listed among the
Some
disciples earlier?
on and off,
I mean, we just have to,
but everything is a little colored in the Gospels because of, I mean, it's written
yeah.
after the fact. And
Right.
like I say, the disciples, or I mean, in Mark, we're reading the disciple Peter's words, but
Hmm.
if anything, it's kind of interesting that um, Peter almost didn't call out Judas specifically. You know what
Mm.
I mean? It's almost like, and Peter didn't even say the disciples, just the people there. There seems to be
Hmm.
something in Peter that's staying a little bit above the fray, maybe.
Sure. And well, and I'm sure it hurt too, like you said. I don't know how long after this he wrote this, um, but they must have just been so hurt.
Yeah,
One of their
they're
own
betrayed.
completely.
And
Mm,
So I thought it
yeah.
was a good. I don't. We'll have to decide what we're gonna do
Okay.
going forward when
I
we want
like your
to
idea.
switch or what we do
I
or
like your
whatever.
idea.
Then we'll
Yeah,
climb
it's like
back into Mark. It might be fun to do the Christmas stuff over
that
Christmas.
would be fun. I like that idea.
Be a little more cheery than the crucifixion,
I know.
right?
Turn on your Christmas lights, get your cocoa. We're
We're
gonna
gonna make the
follow.
crucifix
We're
come to
gonna
life.
follow. It's so terrible.
I know.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right, I think we did pretty good. What do you think?
Thanks, Todd. This is great.
We got it. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Find us on the socials at Todd's World or Todd's World 2023.
And share us,
And
please.
yeah, share us with people. I enjoy this format, so I hope other people do too. I uh I think it's just different. A lot different than like your sermons and your
Yeah.
Bible studies and sometimes I can't even pinpoint why other than there's a casualness and maybe a longer conversation, which that's a that's a marker of podcasts. It's part of
Hmm.
what makes them good and kind of what suits them. You know what I mean? It's just a
Absolutely.
longer conversation that doesn't need to be as heavily edited. And
Yeah. You don't really edit much at all, do you?
I don't edit hardly
Yeah.
anything at all.
We're like, yeah, we're
Close
taking a
enough.
break. We'll be right back. He doesn't edit. I like
Joe
that though.
Rogan set the
Yeah.
format.
Yeah.
And I
If
think
he
he did
can
a
do
good job.
that, he did. It's good. I tell people about this though. I describe it to people and I see them just pause. You can see that they pause and they process because it does sound different than anything else.
Yeah. I guess
And
maybe it is.
it is in a really good way. Not in like a weird way. It's actually a refreshing way, I think.
Yeah. We just kind of get at the stories and go with our Bloody
Hopefully.
Marys.
Right. I'll have one next week.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Check out Wildly Opinionated News Hour if you haven't. There's
Hmm.
possibly some stories out there too. So,
Oh yeah, yes, a little different this week, so go check
all
it out
right.
from yesterday.
Yeah, because we're putting this out Thanksgiving week. This will be
Hmm.
released right
Oh
before
yeah, happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving Eve. Enjoy your. I'll be prepping birds and stuffing and
Right?
yeah,
Oh my
that's me.
gosh.
I'm excited. I love Thanksgiving. I'm always
I know.
exhausted by the end of it, but I just love it.
I do too. It's good.
And the
Underrated holiday.
big, huge meals. All right, guys. We will catch you next week. Thanks, Gary.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving. See ya.